I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried. Will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Hey everyone, Kristin Walker here. I'm here with Dr. and Reverend. How do you say that anyway? Dr. and
I
Reverend.
think it's supposed to be
Stephanie
Reverend first. I looked that up one time. I think it's Reverend Doctor.
Holmes. Okay. Reverend Dr. Stephanie Holmes. You've heard me mention her many times, and she's hosted many shows as we play this for Converge Autism, and she's got her own show. So I'm going to, but we haven't had a check-in with her because she's been hosting. And believe me, of all the things I know about podcasting, when you're the host, it's kind of weird to then talk about yourself. And I
I
thought,
know. I want to ask you questions. I want to interview you. There's inquiring minds want to know about Kristin.
yeah, I don't know about that. But anyway, we'll do that another time. Today, I definitely want to just talk more about you and your journey. And how do you remember how long we've known each other? Has it been like 5 or 6 years now or something?
I think so, because I think my recollection of us meeting was the very first Converge Autism Summit, back before it was at the Greenville Convention Center. It was in an embassy suite.
Yes.
And I was a workshop leader, and you were doing what I do now, which was interview the speakers. And it's kind of like, oh, you need to be on this podcast and go to this room, and this lady named Kristin is gonna interview you. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, I don't do podcasts. I don't know what you're talking about. No, like, I'm here to speak. This is a whole new thing, this podcast thing. And you were like such a great host and made me feel like so comfortable. And that's where we met, was at Converge Autism Summit, whichever one. I don't know if it's 5 or 6 years ago. Whenever that first summit was, that is where we met.
Yeah, it's been a long time, and we've done a lot. And that was before I had any clue about myself, which is hilarious. But you've seen that happen with people over and over and over again. So first, can you tell everyone about the books that you've written and about your podcast?
Sure. So a little bit of my story is my entry into the world of autism was through my daughter about 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, we didn't think that girls were on the spectrum. We thought that was more of a male thing. And it was being diagnosed like 10 to 1 back then. It was kind of like so rare, if a girl's on the spectrum. And so I had read a book, in graduate school about Asperger's syndrome, as it was called then. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm wondering if what I'm seeing is this Asperger thing, but she's a girl and she's not supposed to have it. And everywhere I asked, she went through getting multiple diagnoses. And I just kind of fought for what I really believed, that it was Asperger's, autism level 1 now. And so that entered us into the world of advocacy and understanding and mental health, and just that there are not a lot of providers that understand how to help a neurodivergent person or neurodiverse marriage or neurodiverse family systems. It was like 20 years ago, feels like dinosaur age
Oh my
almost
gosh.
of where we were in autism world. So that kind of entered me into this field and then just advocating for her and understanding her. And then about 10 years ago, my husband and I wondered if maybe he was on the spectrum. Actually, he apparently already knew. I went to a workshop when they were talking about adults on the spectrum, and my face made such a funny thing. The speaker said, "The lady in the second row has just figured out her spouse is on the spectrum." And I was like, "What? Like, I'm an expert in this. I am like a married, like, oh, how did I not see this?" And I
Right.
took him to lunch and I was like, "Babe, I think you're on the spectrum." And he was like, he just kept eating. He was like, "I knew that. I've been telling you that for a while." I was like, "Why did you tell me that?" He's like, "Listen, Sydney and I were the same person." I was like, "The same. I'm on the autism spectrum." He's like, "Yes, it is. You didn't hear me right."
How funny.
We went into that and I started like, that might be a thing. And Dan wanted to be authentic or what's the word?
Authentic.
True, not a hypocrite. There you
Right.
go.
Authentic. Yeah.
Authentic. Thank you. Said, well, if we're gonna say we're a neurodiverse couple, I want to be assessed. So he got assessed, got his autism level 1 diagnosis, and then we said, we should really be doing more for neurodiverse couples. And then we are in a really small subset of that of faith-based neurodiverse couples, which is a whole other ball game when you
Right.
put religion and faith in there. So that's kind of how I got my foray into all of this.
Yeah. When you were, let's say in college and you were doing your classes, you had not this as a plan, correct?
No. In college, I was going to be a lawyer. That was the plan. I was going to be a lawyer and I was going to be a DA
Oh,
and I was going to take on abusive people. And I was just,
oh,
I loved LA Law and all those shows that were back then. So I was going to be a lawyer. And unbeknownst to me, the plan was going to change to be a counselor. And then unbeknownst to me, that autism and neurodiversity would be my specialty. That I couldn't, we didn't even know what autism was really in the 90s. I mean,
oh,
we
yeah.
had Rain Man as our basis. So we didn't know anything back then.
I think it's fascinating. Well, first of all, I had a total feeling just run through my whole body when you mentioned you and lawyer in the same sentence because I thought, wow, you would be such a good lawyer, especially for people on the spectrum or families struggling with, people not being treated unfairly. You would be like the big champion. But anyway, aside from that, what I think is fascinating about what you just said is this thing that's out there and it's happening within the autism community and outside of the autism community where they just do not want to they want to turn all of these women and younger women like your daughter getting diagnosed as a fluke, as wrong, as we just aren't capable enough to understand that it's not autism, blah 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 blah. And I think to me it reminds me of Barbara Streisand. So here's the leap for you.
Okay, let's see the leap. I need this leap.
Okay, so I'm reading her book. I grew up with Barbara Streisand. I confess, don't care if no one else likes her. I love her. In her memoir, she wrote that she had gone to UCLA or USC, some university, and was meeting with them to see why they weren't, studying mice, the treatments they were doing for women's reproductive health, and they were studying mice to see, why things happen. And she said, well, why don't you study the girl mice? I mean, doesn't that seem like it would make more sense? And all these men apparently at the table said, well, because they're just so complicated. And she looked at them and went, duh. And I thought that makes me think of this whole autism and women journey. Like, let's just study the men because it's quote unquote easier. And yet we wonder why swaths of women are coming forward saying, yep, this fits me too. And then you've been denied your whole life and all these other things. And then you're told, oh, but that isn't it because you just don't get it. But if you look at logic and patterns and so on, you see, oh, it makes perfect sense. What you just said makes perfect sense. It wasn't even a diagnosis for women. Girls weren't even looked at. So, of course, there's thousands of us that went undiagnosed. It's logic. So what do you
Yeah.
think about all that?
Yeah, because there's like, especially before 2000, a lot of the medical practices when they would study would be on men. So let's just take like heart attack symptoms. So that you used to believe that, a heart attack symptom is, it's going to happen in your chest and you're going to have numbness in your left arm. That's not a symptom for women.
Right.
So when they were kind of doing all of these things about like the heart, America, heart, all that stuff, and they were like doing all this stuff, so women were still getting missed and women were still having heart attacks, but that's not one of our symptoms. So the study was on men and cardiac symptoms and then broadcast to everyone as if this is what happens for all people who have cardiac arrest. So I think the same thing has happened with autism. The majority of the studies were done before 2000. The criteria, the referencing, the research was all on boys or men. And so we haven't really done a new look at, so men and women in general are different and things manifest differently. We socialize boys and girls differently. If a boy is shy, we don't tend to like that. If a girl is shy, we praise that.
Right.
If a girl acts out, then that's why I say my daughter was, quote, lucky. She had behaviors that got her looked at, running out of a classroom and not being shy and being, I think having my personality with her dad's neurology is what got her spotted. She was not a wallflower Asperger girl. She was loud and opinionated.
And
She was there.
I love about her. I mean, the few times I've met her and I've had to interview, I've had the opportunity to interview you with her, I'm like, oh my God, she just reminds me of me. That I have to say, your daughter is one of the people that I thought of first about myself because of how much I think I met her and I started to plant the seeds of maybe you should look at this for yourself, Kristen. But I pushed it aside as we
Right.
as we do for years. So it's fascinating.
Well, that's interesting. Then our stories intertwine. And I think, as I love Dr. Temple Grandin, but she was
Mhm.
kind of put up as the face of autism in women, which she is one
Of
woman
many.
who's on the spectrum.
Yeah.
So as we kind of had the same thing, this like stereotype of what autism looked like, Rain Man and all that, and is male, then as we started to accept female autism, it was like, okay, it's kind of Temple Grandin-esque. Autism in women looks like this. And it's like, well, no. Temple Grandin grew up in a certain way, a certain family, grew up with cattle, then cattle became her interest and passion and career. She prefers animals to people, which a lot of people on the spectrum do.
Me too.
So that is a representation. But again, we just have this thing in society when we see one representation of something, we go, okay, that's it.
Right.
Temple Grandin is female autism. And she would say, no, that's not. I'm not. I have an engineer brain. Not all women on the spectrum have engineer brains. So we just got to keep broadening the understanding of the spectrum. And I always say, being on the spectrum as a neurotype, every human being has a temperament, a personality, a family of origin story. What resources did you have or not have?
What
Who was a
trauma
part
did
of your
you
life?
have?
What trauma was part of that,
Mhm.
plus your neurotype? And all of those things. Are you more ADHD? Are you more anxious in presentation, male, female, gender fluid, gender nonconforming? There's all these different presentations. And so instead of trying to make it look one way, let's open our, I think it's aperture. Is that the word? Open our vision, change it a little bit, and then look at the whole spectrum, because we're missing a lot of people. And in some situations, maybe some people don't know and they haven't figured it out. But when people have been on this search and had multiple diagnoses or been in mental health or having relationship struggles, we need to look beyond what we think we know about autism.
We do, and understand what a journey it is for someone to figure this out later in life. Because, I've thought about, well, God, should I take all my shows down that I did pre-diagnosis because I was high masking, I wasn't really being myself. And then I thought, you know what? I was being myself. I have been trying to be myself my whole freaking life, and so that was me doing the best I could with the information I had at the time. And now I have a whole encyclopedia of more information. And I'm like, no, I think that the journey should stay out there, because it's a lot of women, especially, and men too, are experiencing this phenomenon where you get to go and just take another view of your life wearing those glasses and getting what I feel is a micro and a macro view of yourself with this different lens.
Yeah. And I think I want to talk about masking just 1 second
Yeah.
because sometimes a spouse or a parent will say, oh, when they were over there, they were just masking, And I'm like, okay, well, masking is when a person is trying to hide something in order to fit in. It's not just when a person appears comfortable. So
Right.
if you were doing interviews and you were comfortable in that space as an interviewer, you weren't masking. If you felt comfortable and safe in an interview or in a social environment, it's not masking that you quote appeared more neurotypical. You
Well,
were actually getting to be your real self. You felt safe and comfortable enough to be
that's
yourself.
true. That's true. That's very true. It depended on the guest.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I can see how that could be. Yep.
So, okay. I want to get into your books because that is a whole journey unto itself. First of all, first question, as a writer myself, as I've been writing my whole life, I just now do the book thing because I can, hallelujah. But for your writing, how do you maintain all of the things that you do and write a book? Because it is such an extraordinary process, and I don't even think people understand how much you have going on all the time. I mean, family and everything, plus this piece and studying, traversing a road that often gets attacked, especially that you're in niche with the faith
Mm-hmm.
in a
And living in the South, in
and
the Bible
in the
Belt,
South,
living in the Bible
exactly.
Belt.
Exactly. And also that it's women and how it's not accepted yet in a lot of places about women on the spectrum. So all of that and then getting not just a book, but you know, multiple books and the podcast and everything. I marvel at your architecture, Reverend Dr. Stephanie Holmes.
I used to have really great executive function. I'm in a part of life right now that my executive function is not so great. But I think what threw me into the fire when I was working on my dissertation, because I was working on my dissertation back in 2019, 2020, and I still was maintaining a full client load. I didn't have the podcast yet.
And
Yeah,
COVID
we
was
yeah we did have
happening.
the podcast. Oh goodness, we did. We had the podcast. I was working on my dissertation, speaking. So I think that kind of threw me into the deep end, and I just kind of had to figure it out because in school, the dissertation people don't care if you're busy, if you have a job, like you have deadlines, you must get it done. A committee's going to meet, and you're gonna make it happen. So, and dissertation writing is so different than writing a book that's your story or your experience. All of the stupid citations and all the
Yes.
rules out there that academics just make you jump through the hoops because everybody else had to jump through the hoops. You have to jump through the hoops too. So I'm just saying out there, I'm a little jaded about the academic system.
I know.
But so that kind of started it. And so I'm going to start with that book that isn't published yet because I'm hoping maybe a listener has a connection for me. So the book that I'm writing right now is based on my dissertation studies of really needing to build an inclusive environment in the public school system for autistic students. So what my study did was I didn't want to just talk to educators. I wanted the full picture of all stakeholders, the educators, the administrators, the paras, the school psychologists, the parents, and I wanted people on the spectrum to say whether or not they felt included, because sometimes the public school system comes up with things that they call inclusion that the people who are supposed to be included in don't necessarily feel like that's very inclusive.
Right.
And so I had to really fight because in the ethics board, people on the autism are considered a disabled group. Okay. And that's fine. But in the research world, it's quote unethical to involve people with disabilities who are vulnerable people groups.
Interesting.
So I was like, okay, I understand that. But if someone's volunteering and they want to tell their story, they want to be a part of it, we can't just quote protect them and their vulnerability and not let them speak up on their behalf. We have got to stop speaking on their behalf. We must interview them. So cost me an extra 6 months because that was a fight I had to fight because I wanted the autistic voice as part of my story.
And
Our
Yes.
Compromise was they had to be over the age of 18. So, okay, fine. And they had to have gone through the public school system. So it was kind of like, what does each person say is a barrier to inclusion, and what are steps towards inclusion? So that was my research. But then I am not an educator in the public school, and I am not neurodivergent. So I thought, okay, what I want this book to be is the research that's there based on a school system that I interviewed, but the professionals that are writing are neurodivergent individuals who are professionals in the space. So they have a lived neurodiverse experience and their professional experience to give some tips and accommodations. One is married to someone on the spectrum and was a public school teacher. So everyone I wanted giving advice, I wanted them to have a personal lived experience and not just their educational. And I think that's what makes it unique. And it does have the foreword by Dr. Temple Grandin. So
yes,
I have her thumbs up, but I'm really struggling with a publisher because I want this to be an academic kind of publishing. I want this to be a book that if you're in college and you're a teacher in training, this is something you would read
yes,
in addition to your training. Because if you are a general educator, you get like one class on special needs and inclusion. That's it. You get one class. If you're a special needs teacher, then yes, you're going to get all of these different things. But if the whole goal is inclusion and mainstreaming, shouldn't our general educators know a little bit more about how to bring, because it's 1 in 31 kids right now. So the likelihood that in your 30 to 35 kid class, that one of those students, at least one, is on the spectrum, that's kind of my point. And then I've been we won't go too much into politics here, but the possible dismantling of the Department of Education is going to be a big difficulty here because that wasn't oversight and accountability. And if you've never had a child in the special needs program, then you don't understand that that's where the funding comes from. Is the Department of Education from the federal to the states. So just relying on the states to, quote, do the right thing, we saw in history they didn't do the right thing during the desegregation movement. So there was a reason there was oversight put in. And so now, if we don't have federal oversight, we really need our teachers and administrators to know better so that they can do better and choose the right thing for their autistic students.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. All right, listeners, if there's anybody out there that you know, please contact info@mhnrnetwork.com, or you can email Dr. Stephanie. Where can they reach you? Or go to your website. What's your
go
website?
to my website, which is Holmes. That's my last name, Holmes, like Sherlock Holmes. HolmesASR.com, and there's a contact button. And so also on that page, you'll find our family book. So our family book, I had written a book a long time ago, 2015, back when the puzzle piece was still in favor with the autism community, but now it's not in favor with the autism community. So my cover and some of my language was a little ableist, right? It was 2015, 10 years ago. I've learned, I've grown, I know better, and I'm doing better. So I pulled my first book off because I felt like there were some things that now needed to be changed. And Sydney said, well, Mom, you wrote that story kind of about me. I'm in my 20s now. I would like to add my own, part of that. I was like, okay. So mother-daughter book. Good. And then Dan's like, well, but I got my diagnosis, and as a dad and not knowing and how that impacted our marriage, and then knowing, I was like, okay, that's good. And then my other daughter's like, well, what about being a sibling to someone on the autism and having ADHD and feeling like her autism, shadowed my ADHD? And I was like, oh, great. A family book with 3 neurodivergent family members. And I get to be the executive function for it all. But we did it, and we still love each other, and nobody died. So I feel that's a testament. So we kind of wrote it in the, I kind of start telling the journey because Sydney doesn't have a lot of memory of her childhood. And then she kind of picks up in middle school and high school. She talks about bullying, mental health, the importance of places of faith, accepting autism and accepting children and teens with autism. What happens if you don't? Erica talks about the sibling stuff and sometimes falling in the shadow when one person has more needs than the other. And Dan talks about his adult diagnosis and what he didn't know and all the different things. So it's really from a family perspective. And I think that's a unique thing. There's a lot of autism stories out there, a lot of family stories out there. I think this is the first book with a 4-person perspective, with 3 neurodivergent persons and the mom who happens to be a counselor coach.
I know it's a unique situation, but it offers so much perspective. That's what's so nice about it. Oh,
And let's see, then the last one is Uniquely Us. That one just came out. This one is the super niche book that you were talking about because while I opened up the book, and while I opened up the survey and the research to anyone, 95% of the people who responded claimed to be evangelical Christians. So it really is more kind of based on what evangelical Christians have as their perspective in a neurodiverse relationship. So it starts out research based and of what 300 people who are in a neurodiverse Christian relationship said that they experienced. It also has qualitative interviews of people's personal stories. Every story vignette is a real person unless otherwise stated. And then because there are some nuances that aren't my specialty, like an SLP or someone who works in executive function, we invited other people in to write a chapter into their area of expertise and their work so that it's research, there's story, and there's practical tips. Again, there's a lot of books out there of neurodiverse couples telling their story, which is great. What do we do about that? You're one couple, and that's not how this works in my family. So I really wanted to broaden it. There's 30 or 40 different stories and vignettes in there with practical tips. You're going to get the book. It's going to resonate, hopefully validate you, then give you some practical advice. And then really, chapters 12 and 13 is why I wrote this book, because it talks about abuse in religious systems. And this is really difficult sometimes in a neurodiverse Christian relationship. If the man is on the spectrum and is really rigid about religion and roles, and you're in a really rigid religious faith system, abuse and misappropriation of scripture and roles and women can become a very abusive place in the neurodiverse Christian culture. And so the rest of the book is really important, but I wrote it for 12 and 13, especially for women who are in these situations and they're being abused, and neurodivergent women too, right? Because the neurodivergent woman might be stuck in her black and white thinking. I can only divorce because of adultery because that's what my church says. And I'm stuck in that black and white thinking, even though I'm possibly being abused in this relationship. So that kind of black and white thinking can also trap a neurodivergent woman in an abusive relationship. So this one is definitely more faith-based. So I would say, while, chapters 1 through 5 could be for anybody, when you get into it, it is part of the faith niche, I think.
And I mean, there are a lot of faith-based people and a lot of faith-based readers that need help. So I think, it's interesting. It makes me think of someone I interviewed. It was a man, and he was in he's Christian, and this was a few years ago before I knew anything about myself, or I was avoiding it, whatever it was. But I remember interviewing him, and he was completely controlled by his wife, who had autism and ADHD, and she was so dogmatic about their faith that he could not do anything. He was being abused constantly. And, unpacking that, I saw some behaviors that he talked about that he was dealing with, and I recognized them from my own family. So that was another one of those times I went, oh, that dogmatic way in any religion.
Mhm.
It can happen. It can happen outside of religion. You can be dogmatic about being anti-religion. So
Right.
yeah, it's interesting because when you meet someone that has just been drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled into them that everything that they do and say doesn't fit within the confines of their spouse's dogmatic belief system, can be extremely toxic.
Yeah, let me take the example of a lie. I have to talk about this a lot with my couples, that sometimes the neurotypical wife will say, my spouse lied. And so I'll say, okay, well, first of all, and it sounds like I'm a lawyer, right? A lie does have an intention to deceive or manipulate or to omit something to appear better. If your husband on Monday agreed to do something on Saturday and forgot because of an executive function issue, is that a lie? I don't think so. Right. They say, but he agreed to do it and he didn't do it. I was like, okay, well, we've got to come up with a strategy to help him keep his commitments, because yes, this will hurt your trust in your relationship. If I make an agreement and I don't follow through, then yes, we've got to figure out the strategy. But to make that a sin or a lie, that's that's too strong. Like, that's not a lie. Now,
Yeah.
if he keeps doing it in feigned incompetence, which some of them men can do, they can feign incompetence to not have to do the thing they want to do. But it's like, if it's a true forgetting, like, oh my gosh, I didn't write that down. I forgot. I am so sorry. And that does keep happening. I get it. I get it. It hurts trust and hurts relationship. But to say, like, you're lying and you're a liar, and then say, well, he got really defensive. Well, I'd get defensive too if I got called a liar. Right. So now we're talking about something that maybe needs a weakness, a challenge that needs a strategy, to now you're calling it a character or a sin problem.
Right.
Because I just believe a lie has to have an intention, deception, manipulative feature. Just something not being the truth doesn't mean it's a lie. And that sounds very lawyery, but I think it's really important.
Oh, it's 100% true. I mean, I understand it totally. You know how many times I have woven a story out of my life to keep safe? And have, like, in a situation where if somebody is just at me, I'm overloaded, I can't get out of it, and I don't do this anymore. But when I was younger, especially in school, and so I would make up all kinds of stories just to flash and dazzle them enough that I could dip out the back and get away from that person.
Right. We know that it's a fawn response. It's a trauma response.
Absolutely. So the whole lying thing, I was always like, whatever. If I got to say that to get you to stop following me home every day from the bus stop, I'm going to say it every single day and think I'm a champion and a warrior for figuring that out. I'm not going to listen to the taunts of liar, liar, pants on fire. But I had that figured out. But I think because I had therapy, my therapist to say, you're not lying, you're protecting yourself. But I saw so many other kids that did get blasted for that. And I would look at them and think, God, they were just trying to be safe. They were literally trying to be safe.
Yeah. And now we used to just talk about fight or flight. And then we learned about fight, flight, freeze. And now we know fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And I was just talking with some women today about that. Like, okay, maybe when you present something to your autistic spouse, they get overloaded and they go, sure, I'll do it. It's like an acquiesce. But
Right.
at that moment, you seem like a threat. Your request seems like a threat. And I will say anything to make the threat go away, like a possum playing dead to make the predator go away. And I know that's really strong. And I'm not trying to invoke any big words there, but it's like at that moment in time, it's a threat. I was like, okay, so this is something that person needs to work on, their trauma and fawn responses. Yes, I hear you. However, if you're sensing that overloading and they acquiesced and they said yes, best to circle back around maybe tomorrow and say, hey, yesterday you agreed to do ABC or 1, 2, 3, and you were overwhelmed. Was that a fawn response? Was that a commitment? I need to know. I think that's a fair question, to ask. You agreed yesterday, but I'm not sure if you were in the state of mind that you really could agree. Is that, are we going to renegotiate? And then at that point, if it keeps happening, then yes, that person needs to go do some trauma work. If a fawn response, I'll say whatever and keep telling a story. I'll say I'll pick up the kids at school, but leave them there.
Right.
That's a problem.
That's a big problem. Yeah.
That's a big problem. That's more than just storytelling and self-protection. That's
Right.
like, that has a consequence.
That's a big consequence in our 3D world.
Yes.
If you don't pick up
and something you should be unhappy about. We've got to figure out a strategy here. I wouldn't call that a lie.
Right.
Sometimes when my autistic folks make a commitment, they do believe they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's going to cause a marital relationship issue if we don't figure out a better strategy, because following through on commitments is absolutely something you have to do, but we can't make it a sin lie thing and a character thing. It sometimes is. Some people do feign incompetence because they don't want to do the work. So I'm validating that. But when someone is trying and they've accepted their diagnosis and they're working through, what does this mean for me, and all these strategies that I'm trying to figure out, and I'm in a relationship and I do want to do better, I say, give the best intention and try to figure out a different strategy to make it happen. Let's not get caught in calling everything a lie.
I love that. It's so balanced and it honors both sides.
That can be hard in the black and white world of faith, because sometimes we're looking for a finger to point. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who's Christian? Who's not? Who's following the Bible? Who's not? And it's like, wow, let's put that aside for a moment. Let's figure out the strategy of how to get the kids picked up at school. Let's figure that out. That is the
Right.
problem to solve right now.
Like, who is going to make breakfast and do the shopping? Let's get into
Right.
like the brass tacks and then we'll work on the other stuff.
Right.
Okay, so last question for you today, that I think we'll end up maybe doing other shows about. But are there, because girls, tend to be more verbal, it's a whole new level of studying what autism means in that kind of environment, because we've looked at it like, oh yes, it's the Rain Man thing. You don't really talk, or you talk in these short bursts that make you sound like you're the computer from the movie about war. Remember that movie with Matthew Broderick and back when we were teenagers?
Oh my goodness. Why did you ask me? Now I don't know.
I can't remember. I'm sorry, listeners. Anyway, you'll know what I'm talking about.
They're shouting it out as they're
They're
listening.
playing a game, and the game says,
Was it War
only
Games?
way to wait. Yes, war games. Thank you.
Okay.
That was it. Okay, where you get these short bursts of, I don't want to play that game. The only way not to win the game is to not play, whatever that was. That people tend to associate like that with like the male autism voice. And it's so not that. And we have to study the differences with women and language and what that means, because, it does exist for us. So, what kind of inroads and where are you seeing studies, or places that are really focusing on that communicative, almost overly communicative? What does it look like when you're fawning and overly communicative? All of those things that we women can do, because our stress loop can be very different than our male cohorts.
Yeah, I know that Georgia State University had I haven't seen the results. I would love to see the results because Sydney participated in it. Um, they stressed her out really bad and then put her in an MRI, which I'm thinking,
Whew.
maybe I don't think you know your neurodivergent folks very well that you stress them out before you stick them in a closed MRI. But they were doing some studies on structures, differences between male and female brains on the spectrum. So you had to do an MRI, but it was very traumatizing for her. I don't think I saw the results to that. So I've heard of some things in progress when the World Health Organization, when they were going to be uploading their book is the ICD, they had said that they were going to look at criteria and talk about what autism might look like in women or in different cultures, because sometimes different
Right.
cultures socialize different ways. But when I saw the criteria, I was like, this didn't change too much from your last ICD. So I don't understand what you think you did that brought in the women component or brought in cultural differences, right? Because like in certain Asian cultures, eye contact is not ever going to be appropriate to elders, and
Right.
so you've got to know your culture as to what's going on there. So I've heard things in the buzz that are supposed to be happening, but I haven't really heard anything definitively that this has happened and here's the results. But things in research can take 10 to 20 years to come out. My dissertation research was in 2020 and it's
Right.
taken this long to get it put in book form. So
Right.
sometimes when research has been done, where usually by the time research comes out, you need to understand we really knew that 10 years ago. It
Right.
just didn't get disseminated.
Until
Yeah.
now, and things have changed. Yeah. And with the way rapid changing information, I brought that up because I know that there isn't much out there, but I thought, well, if there is anything, Stephanie will know. And what's fascinating is there really isn't anything that we can say, yeah, that institute in, you know, Amsterdam is studying only this. And if
Yeah,
that's
I
out
don't know
there,
of that yet.
please
Now,
let us know.
yeah, I do think so. One thing that is better. So from when time Sydney was diagnosed, it was 10 to 1. Now it's 4 to 1. So we are closing the gap
Four to
on
one, what?
seeing
Tell me.
men to women being
Okay.
diagnosed. So it was 10 to 1 male to female. Now it's 4 to 1 male to female. So the sad part is a woman is going to have to go, a girl or a woman is going to have to go through several missed diagnoses, or maybe they got ADHD because the ADHD looked more prominent, and then they treated the ADHD, and now, oh look, maybe that's autism, or a depression or anxiety. A lot of women on the spectrum, the two main things they get diagnosed with is an anxiety disorder or borderline personality disorder.
Right.
Sometimes bipolar.
Yep.
So again, because just how we view women in the medical field too. So it's like too emotional, too much. So we're still, I think they're still in the infancy, in my opinion, of really understanding a lot of the differences. And even when I send people for evaluation, if for some reason I can't do the evaluation, I was like, you need to ask that person how many women they have assessed, because just because they do adult assessments doesn't mean they know the nuances. And like the way we're talking, like you would not pass in an interview because if you're masking, or you got to know to ask the right questions. Like I know if I'm on a Zoom call and I'm doing an assessment, I've got to do more than my eyes. So I'll say to the person I'm assessing, what are you doing with your hands and your feet right now that I can't see? They're like, spinning my ring, tapping my foot, wishing I wasn't here. Yeah, that's not a question on a test.
That's funny. That's so funny.
But you gotta know what you're looking for.
Well, yeah.
Holding it together. If you're holding it together this well, what's going on under the screen that I can't see that you're stemming?
Exactly. And around you, I'm not stemming at all. I'm just like calm because the signal is very clear. You're very full of clarity, even your busyness. So whenever I notice that when I'm around people, this is how it hits me. So listeners, if it hits you this way, it's an interesting thing. If I'm around someone who is kind of very emotionally ordered in a good way, in a healthy way, they could be, having all kinds of stuff, but really they're inside, they're very in tune with themselves. I instantly feel real comfortable. Like I can feel it immediately. Mostly because if someone's out of whack and whatever, I'm usually picking up the cast off of their emotions and then thinking, is that me? Why do I suddenly feel enraged when nothing, and that is a phenomenon that happens.
Right, because it's not lacking empathy. It's absorbing all of that. And I'm learning more and more about interoception. So that internal feeling of feeling other people's stuff or being really disconnected.
Yes.
So I heard it's called like a muted interoception. I don't know where I am in my my mind and body, and a lot of autistic folks struggle with that. Or it could be I feel and see everything to a very intense degree, and I don't know how to turn it off. And it's not through your senses, like your eyes, ears, and whatever. It's the feeling, it's the vibe, it's emotions, it's temperature, it's different. And so that also gets missed, especially for women, because maybe they don't have a sensory profile that is they're closed or too loud or cover their ears. It's like I'm aware of everything in my body and in my body at all times. And not many tests ask that question about interoception and how they feel and experience the environment and other people. And so that needs to be worked on some of our
It does.
tests.
There's so many things. And I would say this. I would say I think it's a tad, probably more than a tad, fascinating that right when we get into the women part of this whole thing, things start to get shut down. So,
well, we also
like,
need to study
course.
women on the spectrum. Women on the spectrum, we need to have more research about how does puberty and hormones affect at puberty time, pregnancy, menopause, perimenopause, because that affects autistic people differently and ADHD people differently. So again, it's not even just like understanding women better. We need to understand neurodivergent women better so that you guys get better treatment. When you're not just being too much. Oh, you're just too much or too sensitive and get gaslit because of your symptoms that so we're finally getting what do you call it? Like the age is starting, the group of autistic people who are becoming older are finally there to start studying. So we need more studies on women. We need aging, gerontology. We need hormonal stuff. We need to know how all this stuff.
Dementia plays a role, because I know now my mom is autistic and OCD, and I'm autistic and I have ADHD, and she's going through dementia. And there's a lot of interesting little syntheses that go on there that need to be talked about. So yeah, there's a lot of work for us to do for the rest of our lives, basically.
And I can't do it, y'all. So other writers and researchers out there, I'm in my little niche getting battered by the faith community. I need other people out there doing some research.
All right, Stephanie, please tell our listeners the names of your books and your website.
Okay, so there's two websites. There's www.holmesasr.com, And then there's www.christianneurodiversemarriage.com. And sometimes I forget the name of my own books because they're very long titles. The family one is Embracing the Autism Spectrum, Finding Hope and Joy, Navigating the Neurodiverse Family Journey, written by Stephanie, Dan, Sydney, and Erica Holmes. And the latest is Uniquely Us, Gracefully Navigating the Maze of Neurodiverse Marriage, written by Dan and Stephanie Holmes, the contributing authors. And the newest book, the title isn't there yet, but it's something about empowering the autistic voice in the public school system. So it's something about bringing up the autistic voice. That's all I can remember of it right now.
I love it. And you know what? This is a little confession to everybody out there. The reason why I make my guests, it's not that I'm this horrible interviewer that doesn't, study beforehand. It's literally, I make my guests say their book titles and things like that because I've done this for years, and the amount of anxiety at messing up someone else's work or their name, that even if I've known them 100 times, I'll say their name wrong. That is part of like this thing that I have and it takes so much work for me to focus on I will forget so many great things in the interview just of my paranoia that at the end I've got to say everything right. So I just say, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to work with what works. I'm just going to have them do it. They'll say it better anyway. So
and then sometimes your guest
turns around.
Question: what is the name of my book?
I love that.
That's an excellent question. Let me turn around and see.
All right. Well, thank you, Reverend Dr. Stephanie Holmes, for coming on the show. This was so much fun.
I agree. Thanks for having me.
Listeners, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next show.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
One thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristin Sunanta Walker, and thank you for listening.
And I can ride the low, low, lows with me. I can ride the low, low, lows with me. Till my vision clears up perfectly. I can ride the low, low, lows with me.
Good boy.